If you could only buy three small companies before heading to a desert island for 25 years, how about we say small cap, mid cap, or any cap? If you could only own three companies before heading off to this mythical luxury island in the Pacific, what would you choose and why? Hello, listeners, and welcome to a very special edition of Stock Club. As you may have heard a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, in 1999, I got excited when I noticed that Dell shares had increased 1,600-fold during the previous decade. So I set out to find the next Dell, and soon after bought shares in Netflix, MercadoLibre, Chipotle, Tesla, and loads more, each climbing dozens or hundreds of fold in value. Horizon is built to find the next mega winner. It's my life's pursuit. For a short time, we're offering it for over half price off. That's $500 off $199. You only pay $499, and there are only 100 spots. Now, we're repricing to $1,999 in 2026, so lock in the $499 price point now. And to existing members, once you're in, you're in. You will remain on your lower pricing. And to all of you still considering becoming a member, sign up today for what is effectively $1,500 off next year's 2K ticket price. That's $499. And I will find a next Dell in there. In fact, I already think I've found one, but that's another story. Okay, on with the show. Ladies and gentlemen, back in the late 1990s, I came across a quirky little site called Fool.com. It was unlike anything else at that time. Part education, part entertainment, and it was completely fresh in how it talked about something that was new to me, which was stock investing. And its mission was very simple: to educate, amuse, and enrich. And I remember showing my dad the site, and he became a fan too. And the following summer, he brought me home a copy of the Motley Fool Investment Guide, which he simply signed Barnes & Noble, Cape Cod, Hyannis, 15th September 1999. Well, since then, I've had the privilege of calling its author and co-founder of the Motley Fool, David Gardner, a mentor and a friend. And for at least 30 years, he has inspired millions of investors all over the world, not only with his extraordinary stock picking, but with his generosity, his optimism, and his unwavering belief that investing changes lives. He certainly helped change mine. And here we are, 26 years on since Dad brought me back that book, and David is joining me here today to talk about his new book, Rule Breaker Investing: How to Pick the Best Stocks of the Future and Build Lasting Wealth. David, welcome to Stock Club.
Thank you, Emmet, and I'm truly pleased to be mentioned in the same introduction with your dear old dad, who I know was a remarkable man. And truly, I love that story. I did not know the origin story of how you found your way into to Fool.com, but you've really been such a friend and such a charmer and such an intelligent Irishman as well. From our forums back in the day in the 1990s to all of the people that you've helped toward financial freedom ever since. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Emmet.
Well, the honor is all mine. David, I'm going to open with a whimsical question that's going to make you think I'm not only Irish, but I'm a stalker, which I assure you I absolutely am not. A little birdie told me that on your mother's side, both of your grandparents are of Irish descent, and your ancestor fled from Ireland to America in the 18th century after shooting his own horse rather than turning it over to an English soldier who demanded it. Is there any chance that rule breaking of any type could be genetic?
I do think that it is, and we are a union of Murphys and McIntyres, County Cork and County Clare. It was the 19th century where we shot the horse, not the 18th.
Oh, right.
That's
okay.
The only fact check I have for you, but that is the family lore. I think those who have Murphy on the back end of their names might be able to relate to that story. But I've been to Ireland a number of times since. Our children have been and gotten to see. Most recently we went to Killybegs, where we have a portion of our family. It's not it's off the beaten path. I'll say
Wow,
that.
it certainly is.
But yeah, but I've loved Ireland. I think I've visited 6 or 7 times. I look forward to the next.
David, actually, coincidentally, Matthew Broderick and his wife, Carrie Bradshaw, the actress from Sex, they have a house up in Killybegs.
Is
Did you
that
know that?
right? I had no
Yes.
idea. I had
There
no
you
idea.
go.
Love it.
David, you pioneered rule breaker investing, which is a strategy that identifies innovative companies way ahead of everybody else, buying shares and holding them long after everyone else has sold. So, for those just starting out today in the springtime of their investing career, can you describe what does it take to be a successful rule breaker investor?
Well, I think first of all, a willingness to take some risk and to be accountable for it. And not everybody has to be able to check both of those boxes, Emmett. Truly, most of the world is content with just, at least in the United States of America, we have the 401k plan. I know you have similar plans in Ireland and the UK and Europe, but the retirement plan, where for a lot of people, even to contribute to it is a heroic act because it means you're
Mm,
saving, and that's great. But many people are content to index, to send their money off and diversify broadly using exchange traded funds or index funds, as we call them here in the US. But Emmett, that is the majority. That is what most people do. I think that if you're willing to buy shares directly, become a part owner, I know my Wall Street has helped many in this direction over the years. You truly are, I think, taking accountability. You're enjoying the agency of being able to choose which shares you buy. I personally love to buy all the best ones. I like to find excellence and add to excellence over time, Emmett. This is what I like to do. So I don't like to index very much because I have to buy all the bad companies and all
yeah.
the also rans and the mediocre ones. So for me, I think it's that choice that you make to, it doesn't have to be with all your money. How about just one share? For a lot of people, that would be stepping out of line in a good way, I think. And so I think it starts there with a willingness to sort of learn for yourself, intellectual curiosity, etc.
Yeah. Well, over the years, David, as you well know, you and your brother Tom have co written numerous books. You have More Than You Think, Rule Breakers, Rule Makers, The Motley Fool Investment Guide, The Motley Fool Investment Guide for Teens, $1 Million Portfolio, and loads more. And I read somewhere that you kept notes for 15 years for your new book, Rule Breaker Investing. How did you know that the moment was right to finally write the book?
Well, it wasn't kismet. It was not foreordained from the dawn of time, I don't think. I just got off my lazy duff and decided I need to finally write this because I truly had been. I think our last book was published right around 2010. By the way,
Mm.
this is my first book in a sense because I wrote it myself. Every other
Oh
book
yeah, that's true. This is true. It's actually I didn't that penny didn't even drop for me. I now that you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because every other book was halvesies with my brother Tom, and
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. In fact, it's a lot easier to write half a book than a whole book. But for me, it was just keeping notes, knowing that I wanted to write one more stock market book, and this is my
Mm.
final stock market book. Anything else that I write, I'm not an author every 2 or 3 years, but I'll probably write one or two more books in future. But this is all about the stock market and what I've learned over 30 plus years, and what I've tried to share out. All my best ideas. From an athletic standpoint, for any footy fans, or I try to leave it all out there on the field. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anything that I think about the stock market is in the book. And I just, I thought I'd write it in 2016, Emmett, and then 18, 21, COVID. And then I finally thought I have to write this book. And so that was the year 2024 last year. It just came out.
Well, you tell a lovely story in the book that I just loved about Mr. Hodgkinson, I think was his name, your fourth grade teacher who took it upon himself to teach you and your classmates all about investing, which I suspect led to your first big winner in the stock market. For our listeners, which was a giant bar of Hershey's chocolate. But but the bigger lesson was the importance of building habits. So, David, if investing was still rewarded in chocolate bars, giant chocolate bars, what habits do you think is worth a lifetime supply?
Well, I think that for me, first of all, starting early, Emmett, this is such
Yeah.
a gift. This is something that my father did give to me, unbeknownst to me, because I was 0 when I was born, and he couldn't have communicated to me that he was starting an account for me, but he did. And when I
Wow.
turned 18, which was approximately 8 years after winning the Hershey bar in fourth grade. When I turned 18, he said, "Here you go. This is all you're ever getting from me. I've invested
Wow.
for you from birth. Go forth and multiply." And so I think that it was the power of starting early, being introduced to the stock market as really a young boy. We would go shop for groceries on Saturday mornings with dad, and he would say, "Hey kids, look, chocolate pudding. We own some of the company that makes that chocolate pudding over there on the shelf because we owned a few shares in the company. Let's go get more chocolate pudding." And so for us, that made him a very popular dad. But what he was doing was connecting us with this idea that in an ownership culture, as you have in Ireland, as we have in the United States of America, as the best places, frankly, around the world have, the best places enable people to become part owners of the businesses whose products and services we appreciate, we believe will grow, we will enjoy, we can hold them for long periods of time, much longer than Wall Street, which is, I think, a key thing I know we'll talk about. But I really think it was that introduction at a young age to the positivity and the prosperity that is available to all if we but save and invest.
Yeah. I took that lesson, the chocolate pudding lesson, and I paid it forward about 10 years ago or a little more. My wife and two sons and I went to Disney, and we went up to the castle, and I said, "Boys, we own that brick." And that lesson was burnt into their minds. They can still recall, and that
Love it.
was your dad's chocolate pudding anecdote lesson brought forward, because I remembered it very clearly from the first time I heard it all those years ago.
I like that even more than the chocolate pudding story. We own that brick.
I'd rather eat chocolate pudding at this stage. In the in the opening notes of your book, you wrote something that gave me a total shot of adrenaline, and I quote directly. It said, "Everyone is an investor, and everyone can make a 100 bagger. By that, I mean you can invest money in a company that will grow 100 times or more. I know because I've done it myself. I've written this book to help you do the same." And then, David, you go on to introduce the 6 habits to develop, the 6 traits to look for in stocks, and the 6 principles with which to build a portfolio. So, for the reader of your new book, what do you think is the single most important mindset shift that they need to believe and act on that possibility?
I think the number one, there's more than one, as you well know, Emmett, but not too many, not too many.
No.
But I think the number one is being willing to buy and to hold with
Yeah.
patience, because truly everyone can make a 100 bagger. And you too, we have helped many toward that, toward their first. And really, it only takes one for a lot of people to create a great deal more financial freedom than most people ever expect. But we've done it a number of times now. And
Mm.
the truth is that you can find a great share like Amazon, but if you don't hold it for 5, 10, 15 years, if you're not willing to sit through the inevitable bear markets that over 15 years will happen multiple times, and
Mhm.
if you're not willing to watch your Amazon stock get cut in half more than once over that 15-year period, you probably won't have a 100 bagger. And that's why I really start the book with that first habit. The first habit of the rule breaker investor is rule number 1: let your winners run high.
Mhm.
And I think that is probably the most important thing. By chapter 3, which is habit number 3, Emmett, as you'll know, I begin talking about the derivation of the word invest. Where does it come from? What does it mean? And once I hope once readers are introduced to that, if they don't already know the Latin root, they'll begin to understand that most of the world is not investing. And yet most of the people who ever make a 100 bagger are investing. There is a big difference between investing and trading. And most of the market commentary, most of the financial news, most of the institutional managers are not investing, and they are geared toward the short term and trading. So I think that's the number one thing that you need to learn and take away. And I put it right there in chapter 1.
You do. I have to ask you something, because you've done something that to me is akin to black magic. And let me explain. So, in and around the year 2000, I did an email based rule breaker course with you that described the 6 traits of a rule breaker investment. I still have the notes in a folder somewhere over
Thank
my
you.
shoulder.
I love it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I remember it.
And incredibly, here we are, a quarter of a century on, and those rules have been comprehensively proven with time and with data. So my question to you is, how on earth did you come up with these rules in your late 20s or early 30s or whatever it was, only for them to be so durable and predictive? And basically, a generation later, we can all go, he was right. So I often went, how did he know that? Did a 28, 29, 30-year-old, whatever you were, know that this was the case? Did you realize at the time you were putting your finger on something timeless? Or has their staying power even surprised you?
Well, it has surprised me, their staying power. And it was a pleasure as I wrote this final stock market book, Emmet, to, in the middle of the book, speak to the 6 traits that we look for in rule breaker stocks. And as you know, spoiler alert, they're the exact same 6 that I wrote about in our book, Rule Breakers, Rule Makers, published in 1999. So I will tell you, as I wrote that book back in 1998, because it takes a year for a book to come out. You write it like last year, and then it finally comes out this year. As I wrote that book 27 years ago, I would not have understood exactly how the world would play out. At the time, I don't think Google existed yet, at least in the popular consciousness. Netflix wouldn't show up for another 5 or 8 years. Things like Airbnb or Uber wouldn't show up for another decade plus after that. There was no way to understand exactly how the future was going to play out. But I will say that there was a period of rapid learning and growth that I had to undergo, because when we started the Motley Fool and all of a sudden we were online and we were on America Online, AOL back in the day, the decade America went online, but that's now quite a long time ago, and AOL no longer exists as it once did. But as we found people plugging their computers into ours and communicating with each other in that seminar you and I shared in the year 2000, 25 years ago, I had to learn, because a lot of other people were reliant on what I and my brother and others among us, and now you as well, are saying. It forces us to be accountable, because when we make a stock pick, and I've always been fiercely insistent that we score everything. I try to score every good and bad pick that I've made over the course of time, whether it's me or my teams, services that I'm connected with. Even on my podcast, I pick stocks for quite a while. I score everything. So I always put things in spreadsheets, and I'm not very good with spreadsheets, by the way. I don't understand most of the Excel functions, but I do know enough to simply watch percentage gains and losses over time. And it was that learning that I underwent, that I changed my mind a few times early. And I'm happy to say that, based on what I settled on, it's been a combination, Emmet, of looking at the companies themselves, mostly because we're business focused investors. So usually greatness doesn't change when you're looking at companies, but then valuations of stocks and stocks themselves are always shifting. And so a portion, of course, of the 6 traits, 2 of them are about the stock itself, not the business. But anyway, I'm absolutely delighted that it stood up and held up over time, and that it's led me to winners and those who followed me. And here's the good news. I think it's going to work over the next 25 years as well. It's not dependent on the late 1990s or the aughts or the year 2025. I think we're looking at something that will stand the test of time and will work in every generation. I won't be around to see it, but I hope that's true.
I hope you are around to see it. But one of my favorite quotes from the book is, with great rule breaker stocks, what goes up ends up going upper. Would you mind explaining that to our listeners?
Well, certainly when we say the phrase, I assume this is true on both sides of the pond. When we say the phrase, what goes up,
Yes.
ellipsis, most people would automatically end that phrase with must come down.
Must come down.
And that is unfortunately the mentality that a lot of people have when they think about the stock market. They see a parabola in their head. And so if the market's high, well, probably we shouldn't be getting in right now, because that means it's about to drop. And I've always certainly agreed with a portion of that, because 1 year in 3, historically, the market does drop. And that comes after a rise, which on average happens every 2 out of 3 years. So every 2 out of 3 years, Emmet, the market rises. Every 1 year in 3, it drops. I never predict which year we are. There's not necessarily a cycle to this. Sometimes the market goes up 7 years in a row. And specifically with rule breaker stocks, what goes up ends up going upper, right? Because if you look at a great stock like Nvidia, what you see from the stock chart over the only term that counts, the long term, is it goes from the lower left to the upper right, which means if you follow that little graph from the lower left, it just keeps rising and making new highs. And so if you sit there going, well, it's probably high now, I don't think I'll buy, I'll wait for the dip, you're probably never going to buy a great company, the great companies, the rule breakers like Nvidia or Amazon. So what goes up ends up going upper. And it's worth saying, not for every stock, right, Emmett? But for the rule breakers, the specific type that I love, that we look at, even though they make drops, death-defying drops sometimes, you have to understand that's what happens. It's not what goes up must come down.
For sure. Well, in the book, you talk about the power of optimism. And it's not just a personal trait, which clearly you have in abundance, but it's an investing edge. In a world, I think, that feels increasingly cynical and short termist and no doubt polarized, how can investors cultivate optimism without drifting into naivety? Because being like Pollyanna is one thing, but being an optimist is something else. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There's a beautiful book called The Rational Optimist, and by Matt Ridley. And I recommend this book to
Mm,
everybody. If you've not read it before, dear listener, I hope you will take the time, because you'll get a tour through human history, and you'll discover, along with the author, that almost every generation, everyone thought the apocalypse was nigh. And maybe not the capital A apocalypse, but just apocalyptic thinking. It's seductive, isn't it? This notion that we live during such an important time that, of course, things are bad, and our children will not, unfortunately, enjoy the same standard of living that we've had. Humans have thought this, not right now, but almost every generation of recorded history. And yet, when we look backwards, we see the unbelievable progress and human flourishing that I think too many of us, I'll include myself, too often take for granted today. So that's a rational view of history. It explains why you and I get to have a friendship, even though we've spent precious little time in person together, although we have enjoyed some of that over the years. But here we are, seeing each other with video HD clarity across an ocean, having a conversation in real time that can be shared with anybody listening in through their smartphone, which would be hard to explain to a Viking. And all of these things are something that is just the part of everyday life for us. And even the richest people of a century or two ago would not even understand or be able to dream of the things that all of us can take for granted today. So this is very evident to me, the great goodness and flourishing that has occurred. And I think it's our part, it's our role, right, to carry that banner forward and to continue to make discoveries. Let's cure cancer. Let's start to commercialize outer space and start understanding the universe more so than we have up till now. There are so many amazing opportunities, from semiconductor chips, artificial intelligence. The internet keeps coming up with new things. It's not like the internet is a fading technology. It truly is a remarkable time that we're living. And I say that even at a slightly dodgy time in US history, if you ever keep up with our headlines, which, by the way, I don't spend a lot of time on, because I really love business and the private sector, which is much larger than the public sector. And that's part of, I think, the reason that there's been so much human flourishing over time, because of freedoms, both business and financial, that are enabled by entrepreneurs. And
yeah.
so this is my view. I don't know if it sounds rational. It's definitely optimistic, but it served me incredibly well, because most people, again, think that things are bad and getting worse.
That's for sure. I mean, it's amazing how people overestimate the short term and underestimate the long term. Some of your biggest winners, like Amazon or Tesla, were pretty much mocked early on. That famous cover, was it, of Forbes with Jeff Bezos facing a ticking time bomb, and every other correspondence that started to mock these rule breaking businesses. It's always a road that has a lot of rocks on it for a rule breaker. What do you think most people still get wrong about spotting greatness early? You are like, it's like you have a crystal ball that works. So you have a crystal ball. What is it that differentiates you spotting greatness early from the next person?
Well, first of all, thank you. Second, let me say about my crystal ball, my palantir, if you will, that as I gaze into it, it doesn't always tell me the truth, and
Hmm.
it doesn't always show the future with crystal clear clarity. And so it's very important for me, and I know you know this about me, to point out how many times I'm wrong and how many bad stock picks that I've made, and how willing, almost crazily so, how willing I am to lose and to be wrong. So I think that that is a very important theme. And at one point, one of my favorite sections in the book is entitled Losing to Win. And it is one of my cardinal themes that you have to be willing to lose to really win in this world. And anybody who's worked in venture capital would understand that, because it's sort of a venture capitalist's mentality where we're going to place a number of bets. We're going to bet on all the horses at the start of the race. And we know that only a few of them are really going to have a great run, and only one or two of them, well, let's go with win, place, and show. Let's say three of them could really pay out for us. And we understand that there are going to be a number of also rans. And we could talk more about my horse racing analogies if we like, Emmet. But truly, I think that for us, it's a recognition that it's not everything that wins. And so you cannot have your heart broken when your favorite share gets cut in half and you realize, oops, I was wrong. The technology is not as relevant as I thought it was, or a new competitor showed up that I wasn't prepared for. There are any number of reasons that will get investments wrong. And
Hmm.
what is it that causes us to spy out the winners? I think you started the question with part of it, which is there is ridicule often, or there are often put downs associated with new startups. And I would say in particular, and I think this is just a human truth over time, it's often because entrepreneurs are very young. And so we think, well, I mean, come on now, he or she dropped out of university. I mean, how much do they really know about how this world works? But I've also discovered that most of the great entrepreneurs usually are great before the age of 30. And if they are 20 and they've dropped out and started the proverbial garage idea turned into a public company, this is something incredibly admirable and very, very difficult. And if they're in their 20s still running a public company at scale, they're probably a remarkable person. But often the financial media treat them as if they're lucky, naive, etc. Now, this is not always true, and we're not merely being cynical about our financial journalists. Some of our best friends are financial journalists, but I do think there's often a prevailing view that, I mean, Jeff Bezos was just a crazy, naive guy to think that people would give their credit cards out uh, over the internet to buy things, or eBay should never work, because how do you know that somebody will send you the thing that you've supposedly purchased from them on this new medium where you're using your phone to dial up someone else's computer? So whether it's new technologies, new ideas, or the young people who often bring them, there are any number of reasons to dismiss them. And yet I actually usually go the opposite direction. I think that they're probably remarkable, and maybe we should at least buy a few shares.
David, your impact extends way beyond the Motley Fool. You served for 15 years on the Individual Investor Advisory Committee on the New York Stock Exchange, advocating for investor education. You spent a decade on the board of the Folger Shakespeare Library, and you also sat, or maybe even still sit, on the board of directors of the Conscious Capitalism Institute, and you're a passionate philanthropist. Looking across all of these roles, from the NYSE to Shakespeare to philanthropy, indeed across fooldom, what thread ties them all together for you?
I would say some combination, um, a mystical combination of whimsy, goodness, history, and a focus on the future. And it's sort of fun to conclude my little series that I made up off the top of my head, Emmett, that I hope mostly explains most of those things, that both history and the future.
Yeah.
Because, obviously, history is very helpful when you and I can say things like the market drops 1 year in 3, it rises 2 years in 3. Most people don't have context about that, and they live in fear of that 1 year in 3, and so they don't invest or they jump out too often of good shares. So history is such a valuable thing, and yet, if we were to remain rooted in history, we'd always be looking backwards. But truly, the best way to find that 100 bagger is to think about where the world is headed and who's likely to get us there. And specifically, because each of us sees something different and wishes for something different in the future. There are a lot of shared, aligned views that we have, but we're all seeing a different part of the elephant. I think it makes so much sense to me for each of us to be guided by our own individual instincts. And that's why, for me, being a self directed investor is so much more powerful and fun and educational than just sort of checking boxes and saying, oh, well, I hope my money goes up. Don't really know what's happening with it because I'm not that involved in it. So I love asking questions about the future. My license plate here in Washington, D.C., if you ever see me driving my Tesla around our nation's capital, is future. No one else got that license plate. I think I paid $25 to get a unique, we call them vanity plates here in the United States. I don't know if you use that. I don't think that thing happens in Europe. Most of those license plates I see in Europe are a combination of alphanumerics and are random. But I
Yeah,
actually think it's a much more fun world to pay a little bit extra and put a
totally.
word or some message on your license plate. And mine is FUTURE. And
Oh,
that's
that's
what it's been
great.
for many years because that's really so important about your money and where we're all paddling toward and which direction we're looking. And so I think both history and the future combined with whimsy and goodness, I hope explains some of my board appointments.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, of all the hats you've worn so far, David, does one feel most natural to you today?
I think still anything connected with fools and foolishness. I mean, in a
Mm.
lot of ways, of course, the Folger Shakespeare Library, preeminent collection of Shakespeareana worldwide. I mean, there is so much foolishness, capital F, over there. But I would also say that if you embrace, and I know you do, Emmett, and many who followed you over time know, but then again, most of the world thinks the word fool would be a bad thing. But if you embrace the concept of foolishness, what you're really doing is you're challenging conventional wisdom.
Mhm.
And
For sure.
that is true of conscious capitalism, for example, one of those board appointments you mentioned. And in a lot of ways, philanthropy um, goes against our instincts because why would you start giving things away? A lot of us are just trying to amass more and more, and for very understandable reasons. But at a certain point, you start to realize, well, we can actually grow more and be bigger if we start thinking outside our own concentric circle of one, just that circle that's around us, and we start going out one more to our community or another one to the world at large or our nation. So, I mean, let me not speak too high mindedly. I think we're all philanthropists in many different ways. It's not about giving money, a lot of it is about giving time. And time is more valuable than money. And how many people listening to us right now have probably spent how many volunteer hours over the course of their lives? So I think we can all recognize how that actually helps us, not just the world at large, when we act in that manner outside of ourselves. So, I mean, I mini sermonette concluded. I don't have any specific call to action for anybody other than lead a more interesting life.
Yeah, that's wonderful. David, there's so many questions I'd love to just keep. I could go all day, but let me hit you with a few more before we let you go. You studied James Joyce at UNC, I believe. So my question is deciphering Finnegan's Wake harder than picking the next 100 bagger?
Emphatically, and to be very clear, it really is really only the Dubliners, his collection of short stories, that I was willing to.
Oh, well, I'll let you off the hook with that one. David, rule breaker invest.
Yeah.
Rule breakers rely on imagination and empathy and insight. So, my question is very topical at this moment. As AI grows more powerful and even more creative, how do you see the role of the human investor evolving over the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years?
Well, I think in a lot of ways we will be smarter. I mean, just having
Hmm.
artificial intelligence supplement, in some cases, lead or guide where we as individuals are headed, or where we may choose as organizations or even the world at large to be guided is much more informed when the artificial intelligence is right, when it's been derived, I think, in ways that are legitimate. There are certainly ways to create so-called AIs that aren't that I, that aren't that intelligent.
Hmm.
There are many, many different forms of intelligence out there, and I welcome um, these new forms. And I've certainly had my life enriched every day for the last 2+ years
Mm.
by artificial intelligence. From an investing standpoint, Emmett, your question, I first of all, let me just say that if you are a self-directed investor, if you've been enjoying being one and you've had some success over the last 1, 3, 5, 10, I would say 30 years looking backwards, congratulations. You were actually competing against artificial intelligence every single day all the way through, because most of the volume on the world markets today is computer driven. It's algorithmic. It's usually very short term. And believe you me, as soon as computers were invented or things like the internet became possible, there were people programming their computers to try to make money inside of a second if they could, getting rich on both sides of the trade. So if you have been putting in a buy or a sell order, you have been competing against AI for quite a long time. AI is not new to investors. Um, I feel as if I've done well through the last
Mm.
30
Mm.
years. Most of the intelligences are very short term. They're not really trying to play the game that we are as rule breakers. But I do think that we'll be a lot smarter. I think that there will be better forecasts about the future. And yet the future is still unbelievably impossible for anything or anyone to forecast. I'm very persuaded of that. So I don't think you're going to start seeing beyond like the weather, which I think will increasingly get right. I don't think there's going to be a great way to predict the next so-called black swan
Mm.
or all of the white swans that pop up. So anyway, I look forward to a much more informed world. I'm very confident as a self-directed investor that I will be made better by the research that AI can now do for me. And much of the games being played on the market are so short term, it will not matter to rule breaker investors.
David, as we move towards a close, can I hit you with a couple of listener questions? I won't call it quite a quick fire round, but a medium fire round. Would that be okay with you?
I'll be tight with my answers, Emmett. Let's
No,
do it.
no, no. I believe me. Go as long as you like. I just have three, and I don't want to burden you with too many of them. So, first question is from Growth to Value, who said, David has picked many stocks the market looked down on, like Amazon. Did he have his own personal wall of worry because of that before recommending a stock? And if so, how did he climb it? I love that question because every time I open my mouth, I have a mini worry wall that I need to get over.
Well, indeed, the reason that most great rule breakers rise over time is because, as you and I talked about earlier, Emmett, they are doubted. And
Mm.
it's often, it seems preposterous. Like, for example, when Netflix showed up, why would you mail your DVDs into Netflix when you could just drop off a vid at the
Mm.
local Blockbuster or whatever the video store was in Ireland
Hmm.
or in India or wherever worldwide? Why would you mail back and forth with Netflix and have a queue? And it seemed preposterous. And so did so many great innovations. When robotic surgery first was attempted, I'm sure people were thinking, why would you do that using robotic gloves when you could just use human hands, as we've always done with surgery over time? So I think the wall of worry that From Growth to Value is speaking to is always present when anything new shows up. As humans, we're kind of conditioned to distrust new things. Show me is actually the motto of the state of Missouri here in the United States of America.
Oh,
But that's really what a lot of us human beings feel when something new pops up, including AI. A lot of people
yeah,
say,
for
show
sure.
me right now. So I think that's part of the wall of worry, and I think you just have to expect it and recognize that what happens is people who initially worry, some of them start to change their mind, and they
Mm.
start saying, you know
Mm.
what? Actually, maybe the internet is going to be a good thing, or people will use their credit cards, or AI is
Right.
something good. And then
Yeah,
they convert to becoming buyers, and then they convert to becoming share owners. And that's what powers returns over time.
I love it. The second of three, David, is from Darren Warnford, who said, many investors admire the rule breaker approach, but would struggle to stay the course during downturns or when a disruptive company falters. What practical advice can you give in maintaining conviction without slipping into blind optimism?
Most of the time that our rule breakers drop, and we talked about this earlier, Emmett, if you hold any great company, Amazon, Nvidia, the list goes on, it's going to lose a third or more of its value probably once every 4 or 5 years, which means if you hold it over 25 years, which is how long you should be and still be holding Amazon and Nvidia, that means that's going to happen many times.
Yeah.
I think what emboldens me or provides me comfort is, why is the stock down? And most of the time, the stock is down because either A, the overall market is down. And so, of course, when 2008-9 happens, everything drops. Was that the fault of Amazon or Nvidia? No, it's just participating in a broad decline, a bear market. So that explains a lot of the drops that we can live through anyway. But then a second category of reasons for great stocks dropping is because stuff happens and friction pops up. There will be a new competitor, a new technology. The company will make its own mistake. And as human beings, we will make mistakes and the company will misguidedly go down a path. But what typically happens is greatness reverts and gets back on track, and that's happened any number of times with these kinds of companies. But Emmett, what really happens is the shares overshoot. So the company makes a mistake, like Netflix when it introduced Quickster. Netflix 2011 introduced a separate brand and divided briefly customers' experience between streaming and DVD. And now all of a sudden you have two different, and it was a huge mistake, and the stock lost
Yeah.
2/3 of its value in 6 months.
Wow.
And the actual subscriber base for Netflix, I think, dropped about 1 million subscribers from 25 to 24 million, not from 25 to 10 million or 5, just 25 to 24. So what really happened is the business was disappointing, but it was not as catastrophic as the share drop made it appear. And that is so common. So that second category, when it's not just the broad market, but something the company has done, because we humans are faulty, usually look at the actual business and you'll see it hasn't changed nearly as much as the stock price has. And therefore, stick with the business. Don't get alarmed by stock price moves.
I love it. Our third and final question from our listeners, David, is from Eddie, and it's a lovely question. And it's like the beam width goes very narrow on this. It's like laser pointer question. You can guess it. He said, "Could you ask David, what's your biggest small cap holding with the highest conviction in your portfolio?" This
Well,
is like, give me a ticker.
Yeah, I love it. Exactly. Well, first of all, my largest holding is Netflix, and
Likewise, same here, actually, thanks to you
that's
in large
fantastic.
part.
I mean, for a lot of Fool fans and followers, and forget about the Fools, people worldwide, usually our largest holding is the one that's appreciated the most for us if you've let it. And that's, again, is something that a lot of people don't do. So I continue to obviously have a lot of conviction in Netflix's future.
No, but we're looking for a small cap ticker here.
So I'll say this, that recently, a company that looks like a rule breaker to me that I am invested in and I'm very happy with. I've only held the stock. I have friends who've owned the stock for many more months than I have at this point, but Rocket Lab in the United States of America is an early player in the commercialization of outer space. And I think that is not as big as space overall, but it's an awfully large market. And we're still early on in early days in terms of dropping off satellites and starting to explore. But I like the company's positioning, led by a visionary leader, taking risks, and with a successful record of having those rockets not blow up and be successful for those partners that it's helping go out to outer space. So that's a company in the US that I like. I will also say it's had a really nice run. So if anybody wants to hold off for a little while, you might get a better price. But at least from my experience, I tend to just buy some. Buying in thirds is often what I do as an investor. We talk about that in the book. But buying some of these smaller cap companies, and especially if they're doing well, not despite them doing well, but actually, especially when they are doing well, is for me confirming that we probably are going the right direction with our share purchases when things tend to go up over time. I like things, Emmett, that rise. I know you do too, but a lot of people are looking for buying low. So they think that they should be looking for things that are faltering or down. And I believe it's the opposite for this type of company, for the rule breakers. So that's an example of a rule breaker. Thank you, Eddie.
Well, I'm very appreciative of Eddie asking me to ask you that, because that is a great answer. Right, David, as I conclude, I always ask guests on Stock Club the same question, and I think you've answered it in part, possibly in one third. If you could only buy 3 small companies before heading to a desert island for 25 years, how about we say small cap, mid cap, or any cap? If you could only own 3 companies before heading off to this mythical luxury island in the Pacific, what would you choose and why?
Well, I truly, I probably would not buy a small cap,
Yeah,
actually, because if
yeah.
I am having to make that kind of a commitment, I'm gonna want to. And this comes from somebody who's very comfortable taking risk and losing.
Hmm.
But I would be quite conservative with my selections. I would be thinking about what, since I have no hand on the wheel anymore, what do I feel very confident in terms of its growth? And I guess my 3 would be, and I apologize, they're not small caps, and I'll actually go with the mega cap first. I would probably buy Alphabet, because I believe that Google is brilliantly managed, and of course, that's the crown jewel in Alphabet's crown, and it's so innovative. And so for me, the rule breakers are always the companies in every industry, Emmett, that are the most innovative. So I believe that that company is beautifully positioned in all market environments, including AI, to continue to grow and do good things. So that would be the first one. The second one, I mean, since I just said it's my biggest holding, I guess I should say Netflix, because I love companies where I can't find the Pepsi Cola if this company is Coca-Cola. And truly, like, I could look at Netflix and say, well, I mean, there's Amazon Prime, there's Apple TV, there's HBO Max. I'm sure there are some European equivalents thereof, but I really don't see anybody globally operating in a way that is so winning. And I think that we humans love to be entertained. And I think AI will only make it more and more compelling in terms of the video storytelling options that are on offer. So I really like Netflix. And then the third one, a company I obliquely referenced some minutes ago, was just Intuitive Surgical, because this is another high conviction company for me, because, again, there is no competitor at any scale to what Intuitive is doing. And what it is doing is transforming surgery into a world of human hands and faultiness and invasiveness into minimally invasive, robotic driven, uh, uh, fewer days of bed rest, fewer days recovery needed, much more economical for hospitals, treatment. I think that there's a good likelihood that most, if not all, surgery goes to become robotic assisted or robotic over time. And I only see one player at scale positioned to do that. And they've been doing it for more than 20 years. So I guess my desert island picks, there you are. I could have come up with 15 others, because there are so many companies I like and admire. But if we're really having to say we're going off and we can't do anything about it, I would feel comfortable in those companies.
Great answers as ever, David. And in fact, if I recall correctly, you picked Intuitive Surgical probably 19 and a half years ago for one of your services. So good call.
Thank you.
David Gardner, it's been an absolute honor and a real pleasure having you on the show. So all that remains is for me to say to the original fool, fool on.
Thank you, Emmett. To another fool who's been with the Motley Fool about as long as the Motley Fools existed, because I remember you back on our early discussion boards, Emmett, and all of the fun and value that you've been adding to the lives initially of just Motley Fool visitors, but now for your own company and what you're doing in Ireland, and for those who follow your work. I'm very proud to be associated with you, and I had such a good time with you on your podcast. Thank you.